Well, the final report is out on the Reno T6 midair after the gold race in 2023. It seems cut and dried, but I don't think it is. I don't think it's quite that. I have a different take on it, if you will. So stick with me on FlyWire and see what I mean. Hi, I'm Scott Perdue, and today on FlyWire, I'm going to look at the final report on the midair between race 6 and race 14 at the conclusion of the T6 Gold Race at Reno on 17 September 2023. As I was going through the docket for this accident and reading the various witness statements as well as the race procedures, and they're extensive, it struck me how complicated this whole setup was. I think the race procedures were well thought out and designed to maximize safety. From a procedural standpoint, the human interaction, both from the controller's perspective and the pilot's, proved fatal in this accident. To race at Reno, you have to go through a pylon racing course where you practice the procedures and the formation flying required. And by the way, the racing goes from 50-foot AGL to 250-foot AGL. That's a bit low in anyone's book, if you ask me. Add to that the complexity of flying within inches of feet, maybe, of someone else, trying to beat them to the next corner, okay? This is complex stuff, highly challenging. And a qualifying school is a good idea. I'm all for that. You have to pass an airborne flight review. You have to attend the ground school. You got to pass a race course flight review and a written test, and then common emergency situations in a simulated environment. Because, hey, your engine quits. What are you going to do? There were 8 airplanes in the T6 Gold Race that day. There was the pace airplane and a ride airplane, and then 6 racers. Leading the race was race 14. By some accounts, he was as much as 15 seconds in the lead. Race 6 was in second place, race 66 was in third, and race 88 in fourth. The other 2 racers were, frankly, too far back to be a factor in the accident sequence. I'm not going to talk about them. Race 88 gave a very accurate, detailed account of the accident sequence. He did miss the downwind abeam call from race 14 at 8 minutes and 21 seconds on the tape. Race 6 called downwind abeam at 8:50.9, and making him 29 seconds more or less behind the race leader, race 14. And at 8:55.6 on the tape, race 14 called base with gear. Race control should have responded with a clear to land, but I didn't hear it. The tape doesn't have that transmission. However, race 88 reported hearing a base with gear call followed by clearance to land. There are several garbled transmissions, I'll admit, on the tape, and I couldn't make them out, and the tape was edited, so I'm not sure exactly if that's clear what happened there on the tape. What is important is the flight path description given by race 88. He reported that on downwind he could see race 66, third place, in front of him at co-altitude and slightly to his left, and race 6 was ahead of race 66 and well inside both 66 and 88. He didn't see race 14. 88 recalls hearing race 66 ask for the 6's position twice. Again, that's not on the tape. Race 14 called base with gear, as I mentioned, 4 seconds after the abeam call from race 6, so he should have been well ahead of him. Race 88 calls downwind abeam at 9:09 on the tape, and apparently the sound of the collision was recorded by a witness at 9:23 on the tape. The next transmission on the tape is at 9:32.2 when race 66 reports a mayday down there, followed by a red flag, 3.5 seconds later, where they stopped everything. We cannot recreate the flight paths of the various aircraft involved, but we can surmise that race 14 was much wider than the ground tack chosen by race 6. 6 was tight, well inside the following airplanes, and I think it's clear at this point that race 6 was expecting to see race 14 on his left, okay, with his gear extended, about to turn final, if not already on final. The NTSB investigation determined that the disk of the sun would have been to the right of race 14's path as he's going this way, and to the left of race 6, and about 50 degrees above the horizon. So it would have been right about here for race 6. This would make the sun a factor as he's looking to his left, trying to pick up race 14, where he expected him to be. Race 66 in his witness statement reported that after he called downwind abeam, he visually picked up race 14 below and to his right on base and saw race 6 ahead of him and on his left. He put his gear down to develop some separation and began a left turn. He lost both 6 and 14 during the early phase of the turn, and he picked up 14 where he expected him to be in level flight. He then realized there was nothing behind the rear seat of the airplane. Very slowly it nosed over and began rolling right, with the nose dropping in each roll, and then impacted the ground at about 80 degrees nose low. That was when he called the mayday. He never reacquired race 6, and he was worrying that he was below him, and he repeatedly called for his position on the radio. So that was after the actual collision had happened. Race control reported that he had given traffic advisories to both 14 and 6, and as I said, there were multiple garbled transmissions, but no discernible traffic calls from race control. A race control volunteer reported hearing the race controller tell race 66 that he was following traffic on downwind. He also witnessed the collision. So I think the radio calls were made. The actual tower controller did not participate in the evolution. Race control had the field, and he was running the situation, running the race. The race operating procedures provided no distinct role for the tower operators to provide traffic separation or participate, although the air boss stated that it was an expectation that they would chime in. Other witnesses on the ground reported that both T6s were at 300 feet, race 14 headed south for runway 8, and race 6 was on a westerly heading 75 degrees to the race 14 flight path, so it was converging like this. And there's some things that get in your way when you're talking about somebody on that bearing. You can see the accident site in this photograph from the docket right here. It clearly shows the extension of the flight path of each aircraft was on. Race 6 was on a southwest heading and almost perpendicular to race 14, which was on a very wide base leg. The start of debris is just south of where the actual collision happened. It takes a while to fall, and it's going at about 100-ish knots. So what broke down here? That's the question. Clearly, race 6 lost sight of race 14, and although by protocol he was supposed to follow his track, race 6 pressed into a potential conflict area, expecting to pick up race 14 inside his own track. Just as clearly, race 14 flew a very wide downwind, adding on the order of about 15 seconds to his flight path, and that put him in direct conflict with race 6. He was well in the lead and likely did not feel he needed to look for traffic at all. Everybody should be behind him, following the leader. An over-reliance on expectations existed in both cockpits. But that's not all that didn't work here. I'm sure that many folks got together and hammered out procedures that would promote safety, trying to develop the procedures for how you would do this race thing and make it all work and be safe about it. And they developed a pretty good system when everything was working. The trouble is that you cannot distill safety into a checklist or a procedure. You have to get people involved. With multiple aircraft and trail going to the same ground track, there are hot spots. The race controller did not positively ensure traffic separation. He made a radio call and expected things to flow as they always had. The lead pilot flew his own ground track, and the second pilot was comfortable not having the visual while he was approaching a hotspot, that intersection. A true safety culture would have had the tower controllers actively backing up race controller and intervening if needed. Race control would ensure the train followed the lead, the pilots keeping the visual, and then calling the loss of visual immediately and using a planned breakout procedure in case of a breakdown in safety. And I don't remember reading that. Maybe they just expect you to go into cool down, which was straight above you. Even the safety observers on the ground were not paying attention to the developing conflict in the air. They had radios, but they weren't looking. They were looking somewhere else and thinking of other things. The planned system had worked for years of racing. This time the situation was different. something was wrong. In this case, a flight path conflict. But the problem was the procedure that was in charge, not the people. The procedure was on autopilot. Radio calls, for the most part, were made, but no one in the air or on the ground was watching to ensure that traffic remained separated. That's action-reaction. It didn't happen. You take an action and then you confirm that it actually happened for real instead of assuming that it did. I am not pointing the finger at any of the participants in this accident. Quite a few of them contributed materially to the accident itself. I'm actually saying that the safety system developed to ensure safety was inadequate because it failed to include people and the backstops to the mistakes that they make. People make mistakes. You must include what-ifs into your best practices, and we've got to develop those, and you got to have your what-ifs. Otherwise, complacency can rear its ugly head. Nobody had the job to watch the traffic and make sure that it was going to flow according to plan. Unfortunately, everybody should have. It's a terrible outcome. So let's find those nuggets here that are going to prevent this from happening again. Procedures break down. Checklists don't always anticipate every situation, and they often have the effect of offloading the responsibility for safety onto a third party. I did the procedure, I'm good, I'm safe. Ultimately, you are responsible for your own safety. When it comes to flying, you have to have your safety radar going until you shut the airplane down and you get out of it. A lot of lessons learned here for all parties in this accident, and basically I think for everybody, all of us. Being in the lead doesn't absolve you of maintaining visual contact with your flight members. Wingmen must maintain visual or break out of the conflicting situation, period. Quite a few eyeballs were available that could have intervened in this conflict. A simple radio call could have saved 2 lives. But the bottom line here is that, again, you are responsible for your own safety. Complacency kills. You got to be on your A game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on FlyWire.